Rupert said once about you have to stop your practice or stop your studies or stop practicing so that you can think for yourself and put things into your perspective so that you can see it from an experiential point. And I think I've been too new to the studies, even though it still hasn't even been a year. And um, you can hear those words, but doing them and knowing that you're doing them are two different things. So every time I try to uh, be on the video, I'm trying to say something from him, and that's good because I can see that. That's what the video helps me with. It helps me with seeing myself as it truly is. I can see what I'm doing. I don't play them back, but I um, can see what I say and feel what I say. And then when I sit with it after I've said it all, and I do have a journal I keep, so it kind of stays up with what I'm talking about on the videos so that I'm talking about the same thing. So it's the same now. It's always the same now, but um, the writing and the videos are the same subject matter. And so it helps me to see where I am. And so I know I've said it a million times, but the videos started out to be me talking to myself, so to speak, and see a subject object relationship so I could kind of learn from myself about myself. Um, and of course, there's Rupert Spira in the background with all of the teachings and sharings, actually, that he does. And it's helping me unentangle myself from circumstances and events and past and future and conditioning and all of that. Um, so anyway, the past few days I have just been wanting to sit with myself and see what bubbles up and not study and not do those things, unless it's in a fun way, just for a temporary release or. Uh, but the silence has been really good for me. So there's some things that I've come to learn um, about what I've been doing and how I see that now that I didn't see before. Because I've been trying to free the chains of suffering in the past by trying to understand them. And Rupert said you would do this, or a person or people do this, but you just don't realize it until you're doing it. And so, and I've done it before. Um, I've always tried to understand what I have done in the past and tried to, once I understand it, I feel better for a while. But the funny thing is the recurrence of things in my life that keep happening even with the understanding. So I'm trying to free the chains of suffering through through understanding each and every one of them, which is great because now I've realized that uh, the more I have really tried to the more these things have all come to the surface and I've been alone for them to come up and bubble up in the surface, it has showed up in my everyday world. All of my stuff has showed up. All of my, just these feelings, these inadequacy feelings, jealousy at work, the ego, um, criticism, just everything, fear. And I can totally see those in particular circumstances and see where it's coming from. But really, after 73 years of punishing myself, and I know why that too. I know all the whys about all the individual personal stuff, but now I'm at a wall. I want to get impersonal about it. And so if we look at that, if I take every single feeling of emotion that comes to me that is what I would put under the heading of suffering, hurtful. Hurtful to me is I'm going to call suffering because that seems to be the big wide label everybody puts it under. I am so used to it, it's hard to even call it suffering because it's just what I thought was a part of life. It's just the way it is, the way it's always seemed to me that it just is. But now I'm seeing um, a lot of windows in spirits sharing that these windows of purity and love. And I've felt those windows in little increments in my life, all through my life, those touching moments, those little spurts. But then you end up, a need comes out and grabs the moment because you need something out of it. So anyway, I'm at that wall where I can put all of those hurtful feelings into a couple of categories, which would be fear and lack. Fear and lack. Rupert does say this, so this is something he says, but now experientially, I am there. I, get- I'm looking at it impersonal now, and I can see those two buckets: fear and lack. Everything comes from fear and lack, and as Rupert puts it, the fear comes from I don't want, and the lack comes from I want. So it doesn't mean that when you don't have that fear and lack that you can't want or don't want. It just means that it comes from a whole different pure place. I want to celebrate life. Uh, I don't want someone to stample all over my or all over love and truth. So it can come from different places, and I'm definitely not there yet, but apparently I'm turning another corner, so that's good. So these two places, fear and lack. I don't want is the fear, the resistance, and I do want, I want because of lack. And so being in this alone place for days, um, and quite often really, but I usually am studying or something. But seeing these two places, I can see that everything in my whole life, from a little squirt, little as far as I can remember, coming out of the chute, whatever, I can remember it coming out of one or the other of those two things, one or the other, my whole life. Wow. And what the rut is that you hurt somebody or something, or something's hurting you, and so you react and you react and react, and you learn to uh, be fearful of life in general and lack being able to cope with it. So I've always, um, fortunately, covered up whatever lack or fear with love. Um, and that's good. That's a good thing. But it can put it down, bury things even deeper. Um, because when I was very young, I 12, I figured out there was something bigger than everyone and everything that had put everything together and created us all and everything. And I called it love. And so it had the right to bury everything. That's just I wore it, and that was good. Good. I don't know um, how else I would have done that. Okay. So this is the biggie that I wanted to talk about tonight. And I'm still working on all this technical stuff. Um, not as much as I should, but minimally, I'm trying to do these things so that I can share or continue to share and make it a little more uh, shareable. But I'm thinking that there are a lot of other people that maybe can relate to that. And I think it's got to be helpful to watch someone struggle through and try to understand themselves. It can, and and referring to Rupert Spira because just because he's so helpful for me doesn't mean he would be so helpful for you, but maybe he would. And because it comes from a different way, it's very direct. And of course, I'm being 73, that might seem like maybe I want to be more direct than you. You might want to take your time and do it a different way. Um, but this has been very beneficial for me and very good. And glad that I've done it this way. So I think that's um, a huge thing. So for me, I'm kind of reading my notes. Um, so I kind of concluded everything with um, for this particular talk by just realizing that what the separate self does for a living, that separation from the wholeness, thinking that consciousness is inside of you instead of that you're inside of it, that you emanate from that one irreducible being, or a lot of religions refer to that as God. And I kind of like that, but a nice name given to that. And there's so many, it's so worldwide with everyone going to the same place of that oneness. And God just seems to fit. There's all other names for that too, which I'm just not as familiar with, but um, that one is fine with me, and it might not be for you, and that's okay. But that separation from that, which I had no idea, I think since I covered things up so well um, through love, I didn't know how far away I I was. But the more now, when I'm getting to the impersonal part, and realizing that everything comes from lack or fear, all those hurtful emotions, um, and realizing when I put myself 100% in that loving place, it wasn't really, I would still get hurt by what someone said, but I just wouldn't show it. I was still always letting things hurt me um, and always trying to understand, the other person, because it was almost like a fight going on inside of me, always trying to understand why they said what they said, or why this or why that, and then hurt inside because it came at me too quick and I didn't have a clue. And just always something going on inside of me, with even with the love being on the outside, there's always something going on in the inside of me to keep that love emanating from me. There's always a battle inside of me trying to keep that going. And it was so important for me to keep that going for my family and my children and um, partner or husband or whatever and wherever. So, yeah, there's a lot of neglect there. But now that I am not taking every, now I hope I don't take all these little things and try to understand them. Um, I can lump circumstances all together now. I don't have to take each individual circumstance and try to figure it out anymore. And I knew that, but I kept doing that. So I kept reaching out. But when I stayed in within my own self and quiet of it all, and suddenly becoming uh, more impersonal about it. I don't need to do that. I can realize that the separate self just lives from being separate with, and the the food is the um, the separate self lives off of all those hurtful things. That's the way it sees life, very limited. The separate self sees life very limited through that finite mind, as Rupert would call it, that um, the mind can't see anything but the outward objects and things. And so everything the mind thinks is limited by things. And once you realize the how you can live in the separate self, or you can know that consciousness or God is coming through our separate selves, is, I know we're very all individual and we're all um, sharing experience. We're all being, I don't know what words to use, but the experience or movement or activity of that one being. We are that activity. We are individual activities of God consciousness, if that works. Anyway, um, so if we can see how separate we've become and how that separation is what's causing the suffering, and be able to open up to that impersonal part that realizes the separate self um, doing this, and it's not other people doing it, it's not circumstances doing it, it's a separate self, it's the limited view, it's the limitations that we've put on that God consciousness, that ir- irreducible self, our irreducible self, the restrictions that we put on that irreducible self through our limited view and limited thinking is what causes the suffering. Um, so, opening up and having all that be at the surface, uh, we'll see where that goes because, yeah, I think that you can come to a realization of something, but as Rupert would say, and I know, at least up here, that it takes a while for you to actually, for it to go come through you. You can know something, and it takes a while for all the conditioning and stuff to dwindle. And I believe mine have been dwindling for a while, very little by little. It's very subtle, um, very. I think that if all of this would have bubbled up without me understanding any of it, I would be probably a basket case. I don't know, you know? Um, I've had moments of, you know, feeling so inadequate and all this junk. Anyway, enough is enough. But if now seeing, it's incredible these different phases I seem to be going through, um, using labels to define things and separate them, and not just being lost in the muddle like I've always seemed to be in my life. So all of these understandings and sharings of Rupert have tremendously helped me unentangle myself from all this conditioning and stuff. So I'm just happy to share. Um, so this podcast, I hope will get better, or whatever you call it. The sharing, I hope it gets better. Uh, I learn to program it better and do it better. I can't really do it better unless I'm better. So I just keep doing my thing and see where it goes. All righty then. Check you later.